listeners and people that might be considering joining Full Circle. And she said, yeah, absolutely, let's make it happen. So I'm excited to be here. What I'll do today is just give you a little bit of a discussion of balance training and fall prevention. I think oftentimes we just have this idea that it's maybe we don't have to be worried about balance, we don't have to be worried about falls because we haven't fallen yet, or maybe we're not old enough to fall yet. But really what it comes down to is the mechanisms that affect balance are so complex that probably one or two of them are sort of going a bit down the tubes or getting a little bit worse. So how many of you feel as though you are as well balanced today as you were 10 years ago? Do you feel like, hey, you know, I can tell I'm balanced as well, if not even better? Or can you sort of sense, it's kind of tough to put your finger on it, but how many of you sense that things just aren't quite the same as they were 10 years ago? You find yourself just occasionally a little bit more wobbly, and it's tough to put your finger on. It's like, why is it that way? But ultimately, that's kind of a message that I really want to get through to all of you tonight. That, you know, there's so many different things that go into training our balance. Okay, well there we go. That's great. That's great.
Just decided to jump off the wall.
Well, if I saw this coming, I was like out of my peripheral, totally tipping over. So it's better that falling than any of us. So
See, there we go.
kind of fun.
It was demonstration.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, even the iPhones fall.
Don't do this.
So I just really want to try to get the point across that we need to really come at balance training by a number of different perspectives or a bunch of different types of exercise because so much stuff contributes to falls. So I'm briefly just going to go through a little intro and then we're going to have some fun. All right. So first of all, I've been studying this at University of San Francisco, another incredibly expensive school, but one of my kids had decided to go there. They would have gotten to go for free because that's the way Jesuit schools work. They could have gone free. You went to USF? Go Dons. That is awesome. Yeah, have you been back to campus lately?
No.
They built all sorts of stuff. This is a new building. This little statue the sculpture is new. They've got a bunch of new stuff, but still you have to climb the stairs to Lone Mountain, which is no fun. So we have a nice campus in residential portion of San Francisco near Golden Gate Park and near the Presidio. And I've been there since 2002, and back in grad school in the 1990s, my advisor got me into being interested in exercise programming for older adults. I thought I was going to work with athletes. You know, I go to University of Oklahoma, and here I am, a little pipsqueak, and the football team's guy, like, you can't even spot me. You can't even lift the bar for crying out loud. So fortunately, I started to recognize that there was a lot more of an interesting group of people to work with, and I enjoyed the opportunity to work with older adults. And I've carried that on at USF. We have some fun programs going on there. And what's kind of interesting is some of the stuff I'm going to present on tonight was just published in the American College of Sports Medicine Journal in February 2019. So I've been studying this at a bunch of senior centers in San Francisco, and some of the exercises we'll practice today are now kind of published and proven research. We actually know, based on a couple of hundred people that went through our training program throughout the city, that if we come at training balance and reducing fall risk from kind of a kitchen sink perspective, we really do the best job we can to reduce risk on all of our parts and all of our strengths and weaknesses. Because one of us might be strong in one area, but weak in another, and vice versa. So we kind of have to take a kitchen sink approach, but fortunately that makes exercise programming fun and interesting and diverse. You'll have some stuff you do well, other stuff that really challenges you, and that's kind of what it's all about. We need to ensure that we're always challenging the body and putting ourselves in a learning zone. Okay, so here's my mom. This is not good, okay? Back in 2009, my mom, who at that point was 70 years old, we were in Florida, and we went to Cirque du Soleil down in Orlando at downtown Disney, which is now called Disney Springs. And she really enjoyed the show, right? And decided when we were walking out, she wanted to be one of the performers. And she tripped over a brick and like took a flight and landed. And that's not what your wrist is supposed to look like. That's what happens when your distal radius blows up into about 1,000 pieces. So She had a couple of surgeries for her wrist. It's still not quite, it never will be back to full mobility because of the amount of damage that was done there. But really when it comes down to it, about 1/3 of people over the age of 65 fall every year. How has anybody fallen here, even if it's accidental? Okay.
I broke my patella.
Okay. 4 weeks ago you broke your patella. Wow, I'm really glad that you're here. And how are you feeling now?
Getting better, but it's a slow process.
It is a slow process, right? Yeah, that's an interesting bone because it's a very it sort of fuses back together. It's like a very alive bone that's always remodeling. But it's so exposed, I'm not surprised that happened. Anybody else have a fall? Anything bad?
No, I guess I have strong bones. You know, these living rooms that step down. And
Sure,
start
yeah.
falling, and I've fallen many times. Not that much.
Okay, good. Carpeted, hopefully?
No, sometimes wood, you know.
Sometimes wood. Gotcha, yeah.
I just sprained my ankle.
Just sprain your ankle. Okay. All right. So oftentimes we'll hear that most people sort of dodge the bullet, but every so often we get a fracture. And unfortunately, you know, some fractures are worse than others. The knee isn't great, right? The wrist is most common, and the good thing is the wrist really doesn't immobilize you. The knee will, and the hip is the biggie. Oh my gosh, if someone fractures their hip, typically 20% of those people don't even last a year. That should be 20% of people die within a year. Because oftentimes they're already deconditioned and it just leads to a really bad downward spiral. And about half of them never get back to full function. So they might be walking again, but now they're walking with a cane or a walker or not moving as effectively as they used to. So we really need to try to reduce the likelihood of them starting in the first place by training their ability to recover. We're never going to stop losing our balance. There's too much stuff out there that can cause that. But what we want to do is rely on our body to be able to recover when inevitably that does occur and we do lose our balance. So these are things that we really need to ensure that we have as part of our training programs. I'm going to briefly take you guys through a couple of factors that affect falls. We have both intrinsic and extrinsic factors. If this would continue to scroll down, I'd be really happy. There we go. So extrinsic factors occur outside of the body, intrinsic factors occur within the body, and they're just different. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's perfect. Keep going. A couple more steps. That's great. That is so awesome. That way we're not playing guess the word. That is terrific. Okay, there we go. There we go. So some of the factors that affect falls. There was a woman who, back in 1995 or so, counted all the different things that can cause falls and came up with 165 different factors. So there are so many things out there: bad weather, bad sidewalks, you know, maybe a bus that starts too quickly before you have a chance to sit down. Maybe it's clutter in the house and you trip over something, you know, Fluffy's toy or a rug that's crumpled up or whatever. Bad lighting in people's houses or other environments. You don't see a hazard that you might trip over. Oftentimes when people move into a new location, we have a lot of older adults who are kind of downsizing, and maybe they downsize from a big home to another home, but it's not necessarily, wasn't owned previously by somebody who had grab bars in the bathroom or double banisters on stairs if there are stairs. And without adaptive devices, we just increase the risk of maybe something happening. And you definitely don't want a fall happening in the bathtub or the shower or something like that. Footwear and clothing, all of those external factors, many of them we really can't change. You can't change the weather. You can maybe hang inside until it gets better. Intrinsic factors are things within the body. So if somebody has a history of falling, especially if it's multiple falls, anybody can fall once, right? You're just distracted, whatever. But when people start being repeat fallers, and that's generally about 13% of the population. So a third fall once a year, and out of that, 13% of people fall multiple times. And those are the people that we know there's probably something going on, because it's unlikely to be just bad luck twice. Okay, so a history of falling definitely increases it. Chronic and acute medical conditions, diabetes makes you not necessarily feel your feet as effectively. high blood pressure, on medications that cause you to get dizzy, arthritis, hip, knee, ankle arthritis, changes a person's gait pattern. There are so many different things that cause us to just be a little bit less balanced than we were before and change the way that we move and make our movements a little bit less safe. Also, bad vision, bad hearing, our inner ears going a little bit wacko where we get dizzy. People get vertigo. Who's had a bout of vertigo before? It is like the worst, right? Your head just starts absolutely spinning. The room spins. Your eyes are going all over the place. You have to do those weird exercises to kind of rejigger the inner ear. Vestibular system, when it goes a little bit haywire, is a big problem. So all of those impairments have an effect. Medication, as we talked about, either medication for blood pressure, even things like depression and anti-anxiety medications that sort of just put us a little bit off in space. Poor nutrition, if you've got really poor amounts of protein, you likely don't have enough muscle mass to be able to stay incredibly functional. And then the stuff that we do a lot with, which is your level of fitness, your functional capacity. And we know if any of those things are at a deficit, we've got a big problem. So that's why we definitely want to pay attention to them and work hard. Next, please. Down arrow. You can just do the down arrow. Thank you, Rosa. There we go. No, that's perfect. Age-related physiological changes, keep going. We're going to zip through this so we can get to the fun stuff. As I mentioned, we've got 3 sensory systems. Really important to help us keep on our feet. Our vision. Let's all stand up for a moment. All right? Simple. Okay? Let's stand up, and you know what I like to do? Instead of saying, all right, let's stand on one foot, and maybe let's stand on the left foot and put the right toe down, just so you get a little bit of balance challenge. And look straight ahead at something that's not moving. Really easy. We can keep our vision. Now, start shifting your eyes back and forth from side to side. So track your hand in front of your face. Track that hand and shift the eyes. Everything should be blurry as you track that hand. Who can sense more wobble? Right? We essentially here are removing our vision from helping us keep our balance. So, when our vision sort of starts to go, because it's such a major component, you can sit for a second, I'm going to get you up again in a moment. When our vision starts to go, definitively we have less capability to maintain kind of a point of reference that will assist with our balance. And a lot of the stuff that happens with age isn't even pathological. We all have our cornea get thicker. We all have the lens get stiffer. We all lose some rods and cones on our retina. And then pathological eye conditions are even worse. Somebody with glaucoma, macular degeneration, cataracts, those are real significant issues as well. Our vestibular system, the inner ear, looks like the snail, right? So basically we've got the cochlea helping us with hearing, but then the semicircular canals and this utricle area here, that's all helping us determine what direction we're moving, forward, backward, sideways, rotationally, and it gives our body a sense of where we are in space, which is really great. The problem is sometimes that system can get a little bit confused. We sense movement when it's not occurring. Okay, we sense movement when it's not occurring. So let's have everybody get up again. Let's have fun with that. This might not be so much fun. Okay? So what I'm going to ask you to do, maybe a little bit of space so you don't trip over people or yourself or any of your objects, is just turn around the circle 3 times. 2, 3. And then stop, and just for a moment, it probably won't last long, but just for a moment, you'll feel that sense of motion still occurring. Very similar to that feeling of vertigo. What I used to do, I used to test myself. I'm like, well, if I go around 3 times in one direction, and then 3 times the other, will everything stop? So let's actually try that. 1, 2, 3. Okay, wait, 1, 2, 3. It kind of worked actually, which is really freaky. I'm like not even dizzy. But anyhow, so when we mix up that inner ear, whether it's due to movements we're making, we're turning our head as we're walking down the street or talking to somebody, there can be a little bit of vestibular disruption that's enough to cause disorientation and possibly a fall, which is a real bummer. Then the last system, and we'll stay standing for this, is our somatosensory system, the nerves on the bottom of our feet. If you have diabetes, you're in really bad shape because ultimately at some point the nerves on the bottom of their feet start losing sensation. We call that peripheral neuropathy. That's also secondary to some other conditions and medication interactions as well. And let's just sense what it's like to have less sensation at the bottom of our feet than we typically do in a normal stance. Let's put ourselves into a tandem stance where the toe is touching the heel. And just kind of stand here. And now we're kind of creating a more limited base of support for us to stand on. And how does this feel as it relates to being able to keep our balance? It's much, much more difficult. So if we kind of lessen the neural input from the bottom of our feet, it's more difficult for us to figure out how to keep our balance, okay? So these three systems, even with healthy aging, it's just part of the biological process. Doesn't matter how hard you work out, doesn't matter how well you eat, how healthy you are, there are certain things that we know just change with age. So you guys can go ahead and take a seat. That's why I can ask a masters athlete. When Rosa and I were in Albuquerque about a month ago, it was right before the National Senior Games. Okay, and these were some of the best athletes, older athletes in the United States, competing in all sorts of different things. And I chatted with a few of them in the hotel, and I asked each of them, I said, you know what, I'd like to know, do you feel like you are as balanced, or your balance is as good as it was 10 years ago? And every one of them said, no, I know there's stuff going on. Right? I'm still a good athlete, I can still do stuff, but I'm just not as balanced as I used to be. And a lot of that is due to the fact that things just change with age. And definitely if we don't focus on the things we can change, then they change more rapidly and we get worse a lot quicker. So there's just some things that we probably a good move. A couple of things I'd really like to recommend to you guys just outside of the realm of exercise, okay? Some things that we should really be aware of that we talk to other professionals about to ensure that we're mitigating our risk as best we can, okay? First of all, a lot of people come into our programs in San Francisco and they've been deathly afraid of falls for a long time. They maybe had a fall years ago and it really has gotten into their head and it's caused them to reduce the enjoyment of life. So there are some